On the 30th of April, 1555, the bells of London rang for a birth. They rang from the churches of the city, and the people lit bonfires and spilled into the streets, because the word had come down from Hampton Court that the Queen of England had been delivered of a son, a prince, an heir. The news was already racing for the courts of Europe. There was no son. There was no child at all. Inside the palace, in a chamber that had been sealed and darkened and overheated for weeks in the fashion of a royal lying-in, a woman of 39 lay waiting to give birth to something that was never going to be born. Her belly had swelled. Her courses had stopped 7 months before. She had felt, or believed she felt, the child move. Her physicians had counted the weeks and named a date, and the date had come and passed, and no one in that room could explain why. This was the first time. It happened again. The woman in that chamber was Mary Tudor, Mary the First, Queen of England in her own right, the daughter of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Not the other Mary this table has held. Not Mary Stuart, the Queen of Scots, who died under an axe in a castle hall 29 years after this queen died in her bed. A different woman, a different quarrel, a death of another kind entirely. This one left no wound to read. History remembers her as Bloody Mary for the nearly 300 men and women she sent to the fire in 5 years for their religion. It remembers her false pregnancies as a kind of madness, the delusion of a desperate wife who wanted a child so badly her mind conjured one out of nothing. Twice. That is the story. It is wrong about the part that matters most. The delusion was real enough as a delusion, but the body underneath it was not imagining anything. The belly that swelled at Hampton Court was carrying something. It simply was not a prince. Let me open the file. The subject is a biological female. Age at death, 42 years and 9 months. Born at the Palace of Placentia in Greenwich on the 18th of February, 1516. The only child of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon to live past infancy. Died at St. James's Palace in London in the early hours of the 17th of November, 1558. Queen Regnant of England for 5 years and 4 months. The first woman to hold that crown in her own right and be obeyed in it. Preservation. None, in the sense this table usually means. There is no mummy. There are no scanned bones. No post-mortem was performed on this queen, or if one was, no report of it survives. Her body was embalmed, sealed, and buried in Westminster Abbey, where it lies to this hour beneath the same monument as the half-sister who succeeded her and undid nearly everything she built. Unlike almost every other body on this table, I cannot examine the tissue. What I can examine is the record. This queen was watched and diagnosed more closely than almost any patient of the 16th century, because the fertility of her body was a question of state. Ambassadors reported on her waistline. Her physicians measured her weeks. I have read modern charts that told me less. Cause of death per the record, contested, and comfortably so. The chroniclers settled on grief, a broken heart for an absent husband. The physicians of her own day reached for the fevers going through England that autumn. Later writers added the false pregnancies as a psychological footnote, a mind unbalanced by longing. What we are doing today is different. We are going to take the 2 phantom pregnancies the record files under hysteria and read them as what they were. Clinical events in a real body with real physical signs. Because the thing that made this queen believe twice that she was carrying a child and the thing that killed her may not be 2 separate stories. Cause of death, mechanism, manner, time, Hold the conventional account first because it is a sympathetic one, and sympathy has kept it standing. The reign had gone hard. Mary came to the throne in 1553, the first of Henry's children to rule as a grown adult, certain of two things: that England would be returned to the Catholic faith her father had broken from, and that she would marry, bear an heir, and secure that return past her own lifetime. She married Philip of Spain in the summer of 1554. She was 38, which for a first pregnancy in that century was old and dangerous. Within weeks, the signs began. The court dared to hope, and then came the humiliation at Hampton Court. I opened this file on. Philip left for his own wars and his own empire, and when he came back briefly in 1557, the signs returned. Mary announced a second child, expected in March of 1558. Her own council this time waved it away. Again, no child came. Then the losses came in a row. In January of 1558, England lost Calais, its last holding in France, kept more than 200 years, gone in a week. Philip stayed in Spain, and in the autumn, a sickness was moving through England that outran every physician. So the story wrote itself, and it has a terrible neatness. A woman who wanted a child beyond her reach, a husband who stayed away, a country slipping out of her hands, and a fever at the end to carry off a heart that had already given up. Bloody Mary, broken and childless, dying of sorrow while an epidemic did the mechanical work. Every piece of that is true as far as it goes. None of it is a cause of death, because a broken heart is not a finding. Something in this body was producing the exact signature of pregnancy, on demand, with no child present. Stopped courses, a belly swollen to term, twice. Milk. That is not a metaphor, it is a mechanism. And the mechanism, not the sorrow, is what leads to what killed her. Start with what the false pregnancy actually was, because the word phantom has done a great deal of damage here. What Mary had, in 1555 and again in 1557, has a clinical name: pseudocesis, false pregnancy. It is neither lying nor simple imagination. It is a real disorder in which a woman carrying no child develops the true physical signs of pregnancy. The abdomen distends, the periods stop, the breasts enlarge and can produce milk. Morning nausea appears. The woman can feel what she is certain is a child moving. Every sign the age used to confirm a pregnancy, the body manufactures, with nothing in the womb. It is rare, and it is driven from the brain. The modern understanding is that the neuroendocrine system, the chain of glands governing reproduction, locks into the hormonal state of pregnancy with no pregnancy to justify it. In a woman who wanted a child as fiercely as this queen did, under the pressure this queen was under, the trigger is there. But wanting is only the trigger. The signs themselves are hormones and tissue. They are physical. Now look at the record of her body across her whole life, because the pattern runs much longer than the marriage. Mary's health was disordered from puberty. Her menstruation, from about the age of 14, was irregular, scanty, and painful, and at times stopped altogether. The physicians of the day had a name for it: strangulation of the womb. It was their term for what we would call amenorrhea, the cessation of the periods, which they treated with bleeding and exercise. She suffered headaches and toothache and long spells of the low, heavy depression the age called melancholy, worst in the autumn and the early spring. She was severely short-sighted, a trait she got from her father. By the end, she was nearly blind. That is a lifetime of a body whose hormonal governance was not working properly. And in the year 2000, in the Journal of Medical Biography, a physician named Milo Keynes reading the whole record as a case rather than a tragedy, proposed a single thing at the root of it: a tumor of the pituitary gland. Let me tell you why that one finding pulls the whole chart together. The pituitary is a gland the size of a pea, sitting at the base of the brain, just behind the eyes. It is the master switch of the hormonal system. A common tumor of it, called a prolactinoma, does one main thing. It pours out prolactin, the hormone that drives the production of breast milk. Raised prolactin in a woman stops the periods. It can bring milk in a woman who is not nursing and never bore a child, and it carries depression with it. Amenorrhea, galactorrhea, melancholy, 3 of the things that dogged Mary her whole adult life, from a single gland. A tumor in that spot presses on its neighbors as it grows. Behind and above it run the nerves of sight, which is why a pituitary tumor classically steals the vision. And this queen went blind at the end. It can also drag down the thyroid, and a failing thyroid brings its own train of signs. Loss of the outer eyebrows, weight gain, constipation, and the abdominal swelling that comes with it. Cold, slow, and confused thought. Read the descriptions of Mary in her last months against that list, and they line up almost point for point. Take that back to the pregnancies. A body already flooded with the hormone of pregnancy, already without its normal cycle, already swelling and confused, is a body primed to stage a pseudocesis. The false pregnancies were not a mind inventing a child. They were a diseased gland producing the chemistry of gestation in a woman whose deepest wish gave that chemistry a shape to pour into. That explains the milk and the stopped courses, and how a woman could do this twice. On its own, it explains neither the belly that swelled to the size of a child at term, nor why she died. A prolactinoma is rarely fatal, and it does not fill an abdomen. For that, there is a second reading, and it sits beside the first rather than fighting it. Years ago, in a farm county on the high plains of eastern Montana, a woman in her early 40s came to my table. For most of a year, she and everyone around her had believed she was pregnant. Her abdomen had grown, steadily and hugely. Her cycle had stopped. She had all the outward look of a woman well along. There was no child. What had grown under the skin was a tumor of the ovary, and by the time anyone looked past the obvious, it had gone too far to stop. A mass in the pelvis can imitate a gravid womb closely enough to fool the woman carrying it and everyone who tends her. I have watched that mistake get made with imaging machines down the hall. In 1555, there was nothing to make it with but the eye and the wish. That is the other half of Mary's file. Set the endocrine reading down and pick up the reproductive one. An ovarian cyst, an ovarian tumor, or a cancer of the uterus does to the outline of a woman's body exactly what a late pregnancy does. It distends the lower abdomen. It can arrest the periods. And unlike a false pregnancy of the mind, it does not recede and let the woman recover. It keeps growing. The historians who have looked hardest at her death, reading the swelling, the pain she complained of low in her body, the long wasting decline, put a pelvic malignancy at or near the top of the list. Some reach for a grimmer possibility still, a cancer arising from the tissue of a molar pregnancy. But the record is not fine enough to prove any single one. And now the second pregnancy stops being a curiosity and becomes a warning that was misread. When Mary announced in 1557 that she was carrying a child and her belly swelled and no child came, the body may not have been repeating a delusion. It may have been showing, for the second time and now in earnest, a mass the first episode had only rehearsed. What the court dismissed as an aging woman's sad fantasy, she was 41, may have been the thing that was already killing her, wearing the one shape she would never question. If reading a death the record closed as heartbreak and opening it back to the body that was actually failing is the kind of work you came here for, the subscribe button is where you tell me to keep bringing them. There is one more turn on this file, and it changes what the whole reign was watching. Bring the last year up against the story. From the spring of 1558, the Queen fell ill and stayed ill. Through the summer she ran fevers, sank and rallied and sank again, in the sawtooth pattern of a body fighting something it cannot throw off. In August she was moved from Hampton Court to St. James's, weak and dropsical, swollen with retained fluid. By September the fevers were high, the headaches constant, her mind wandering in and out, and her sight nearly gone. She made a codicil to her will in October. On the 8th of November, cornered by the arithmetic of the succession, she at last named her half-sister Elizabeth as her heir. The very daughter of Anne Boleyn, her whole reign had been built to shut out. In the early hours of the 17th of November, she heard Mass, and then, so quietly that her women thought she had merely fallen asleep and improved, she died. Now set the record's verdict against the bodies. The record says she died of a broken heart, hurried along by a passing fever. The body says something with more anatomy in it. The heartbreak was real. It was not the cause. Grief does not swell a womb, or fill a breast, or waste a body across a year. A disease does. The cause is a body that had been going quietly wrong at the level of its glands and its organs for most of her life, and that finally, in her 43rd year, gave out. The finding, cause of death. On the surviving record, a progressive illness most consistent with a malignant or space-occupying process of the lower abdomen and pelvis, an ovarian or a uterine growth producing chronic distension, wasting, and decline across the final year, with a probable contributory febrile illness during the influenza epidemic of 1558. Standing behind it and unifying the reproductive history, a disorder of the pituitary and hormonal system of long standing. The exact tumor cannot be named without the tissue, which is sealed in Westminster. The class of the finding is all but certain. The single name for it is not. Mechanism of death. Chronic systemic decline. Wasting and organ failure driven by the growing disease, with a final febrile illness as the terminal event on a body that had no reserve left to spend. Manner of death. Natural. There is no poison here, no blade, no hand. For all that her reign was called bloody, her own death was the plainest kind there is, a disease running its course in a body that had been signaling it for years. Time of death. The early hours of the 17th of November, 1558, at St. James's Palace, 42 years of age. Within the same day, across the city at Lambeth, her Archbishop of Canterbury died of the same season's sickness. His name was Reginald Pole. 17 years earlier, his own mother had been hacked apart by an untrained headsman inside the Tower of London, on a warrant Mary's father signed because of a book this man had written. Her body came up out of that chapel floor in 1876, and I have read it on this channel. The rain ended twice before nightfall, and the second death closed a file the first one's father had opened. The category history filed this death under is heartbreak, seasoned with a little madness. The correct category is natural death from organic disease, and the false pregnancies the madness reading rests on are not evidence of madness at all. They are the earliest readable signs of the illness. The record had the one real clue in its hand the entire time and mistook it for the symptom of a broken heart. I have had this family on the table before. Mary's mother, Catherine of Aragon, died a natural death of an organic disease that the politics of her day chose to read as poison. The daughter died a natural death that the storytellers of hers chose to read as sorrow. Two queens, mother and child, both killed by the plain work of a body going wrong, and both refiled into something with a villain in it. The bodies agreed. The century would not listen to either. The medical answer is signed. There is one more question it leaves untouched, and it is the one that decided the shape of England for the next half a century. Think about what the bells rang for, that April morning in 1555. A whole kingdom stopped and celebrated the arrival of a child that did not exist, from a womb that was making a growth instead of a prince. Everything this queen had spent herself on rested on that womb producing an heir, and the womb, or the gland above it, or both together, spent those same years producing the one thing that could undo all of it. She staged the arrival of the future twice, and both times the body was rehearsing her death. She wanted, more than she wanted the crown or the faith or the man, to be a mother. The disease that killed her took that exact shape as it did it. It swelled her like a mother. It stopped her courses like a mother. It brought milk to her breasts for a child that would never come. Then it emptied the room and the cradle, and at the last the throne, and handed the whole of it to the half-sister she had spent a reign trying to shut out. The bells rang for a prince. The body was ringing for something else, and no one in that century knew how to hear it. If a body came to your table with two pregnancies years apart that each produced a swollen abdomen, stopped periods and milk, but never a child, a lifetime of failed reproductive cycles, a slow abdominal swelling in the final year that never receded, and a wasting death in the middle of an epidemic, would you sign the cause as a malignancy of the pelvis, or leave it undetermined for want of the tissue? And would you keep the false pregnancies in the medical file where I have put them, or hand them back to the storytellers? Tell me which line you would write first. I read every comment. Thanks for watching.